I am popping in to share something with you that I just want you to think about. I wore this sweatshirt on purpose, by the way. It goes with what I want to share. So, as you know, at least I hope you know, the reason that I started the Leadership Drives podcast is that I believe all leadership is truly personal, and that oftentimes there are experiences that we have early in our lives or defining moments that drive our lives that really kind of guide us to the things that we spend most of our time and energy on. And because we spend so much time working, then those early experiences, those defining moments, they show up in our jobs and in the things that we do, whether we recognize them or not. With that being said, I recently read Richard Pryor's memoir called Pryor Convictions. The reason I wore this sweatshirt is because his memoir talks a lot about his addictions. He was addicted to cocaine. I don't know if freebase cocaine and crack are the same things, but he talked about that. A lot of drinking, and from time to time he tried other stuff, but cocaine, whether snorting or freebasing, that was his thing. And he also had a thing for women. He was married 6 times. One woman, he married her twice, and he had kids by several different women. But what was striking to me about his story was that he talked about how growing up, he never felt loved, cherished, or validated. As a matter of fact, he grew up in a brothel. His relationship with his mother was a bit strained and estranged. She would come in and out of his life at times. So when she was out of his life, he grew up with his grandmother who ran a brothel. And mom would come in, mom would come out. Mom also worked in the brothel, if you know what I mean. He talked about, having to have a couple of experiences where he realized the kind of work mommy was doing and just the impact on his mind on that. He lost his virginity to someone, I think he was about 13 or 14, who worked in the brothel. And ultimately, he talked about feeling as if he simply had no value or meaning to the people in his life and in his family. He spent his entire life looking for validation. He felt like he never had a sense of self. As a matter of fact, at one point, he talked about how he went out of his way to emulate Bill Cosby because he didn't know who he was. He said he got so good at it that he did a show somewhere and somebody was like, damn, it is remarkable how similar your act is to Bill's act. Then he talked about how he had certain cycles and patterns with women, chasing them, putting them up on a pedestal, and tearing them and the pedestal down because he was working on his stuff. He talked about spending his time with other people. Red Fox was one of them who was high. He talked about other comedians who were also into drugs. And I thought that was really interesting because we seek what's that expression? Water seeks its own level. And oftentimes we seek people and maybe we don't even recognize we're doing it. It might be even a subconscious thing. But we find ourselves around people who are sometimes where we were. And I even looked up the death of John Belushi because he talked about he was with John Belushi and a couple other comedians the night before John Belushi died of an overdose. And it was just a few things that kept him from going with him. And he's certain that if he had gone, he would have been a story too. And it just struck me that not only did he struggle his entire life with addiction and a lack of sense of self-love and acceptance, but he worked on his issues on stage and in front of the camera, and the whole world watched and laughed. And I think it's just really interesting how oftentimes we go through our lives and we don't realize that if somebody is perceptive enough, if somebody is watching, we are working out our issues in real time every single day. And as I read more memoirs, right now I'm getting ready to read the Diane Carroll story, I'm curious about how other people live their life stories and issues on stage and not even realize that that is what they're doing. As you reflect on how you live your life, I like to ask you, what's driving you every day? Have you looked at your life and the things that affected you, whether as a young person or an older person, and how those things show up in your everyday? So when I take my next leadership drive, when I drive to people to hear the stories of what drives them, I want you to have in mind the story of what's driving you. damn clicker.